Welcome back to Pod Games, doing another DeckTech episode, and we're looking at Silverquills Influence.
Let's dive into the overview of Strixhaven's Silverquill Influence. So it's a 100 card deck, you get 13 new cards, 71 reprints and 16 basic lands. The new mechanics in the deck are prepared. What prepared is while a creature is prepared, you may cast a copy of the attached spell. Doing so unprepares the creature. Contract tokens is new for this commander deck. It's a token enchantment aura. Whenever enchanted creature attacks, it gets +2/0 until the end of the turn. If it's attacking one of your opponents, otherwise its controller loses 2 life. The other mechanic in this isn't a new one, but it's goad. So until your next turn, that creature attacks each combat if able and attacks a player other than you if able. The theme of the deck is aura politics, which is quite typical for a Silverquill, because we are in Strixhaven. Orzhov does not exist, so it's white and black mana. The key plan of the deck to layer cheap auras onto both yours and your opponent's creatures using enchantment ETB triggers to tap and goad creatures while simultaneously refilling your hand whenever the enchanted creature attacks with the commander's card draw. Something new we're doing for this DeckTech episode, we're going to do something called commander selection. So we're going to run through the commanders briefly and then decide which one we're going to kind of focus the review and build around. And then when we're doing our upgrades, it's going to kind of focus around that specific commander. So the first one is Killian, Decisive Mentor. He's 3 CMC, 1 white and a black. He's a human warlock and he's a 2/3. Whenever an enchantment you control enters, tap up to 1 target creature and goad it. And the second ability is whenever one or more creatures that are enchanted by an aura you control attack, draw a card. So it's basically aura goad is the mechanic on this card. Forces your opponent to attack and then you gain card advantage. The second commander is Scriv the Obligator. 4 CMC, 2 generic white and black. He's an Inkling Bird. Once again, he's a 2/3. He has the keywords Flying and Death Touch. So whenever Scriv enters or attacks, create a white or enchantment token named Contract. Attach it to target creature an opponent controls. The token has enchant creature. And whenever enchanted creature attacks, it gets +2/+0 until the end of the turn if it's attacking one of your opponents. Otherwise, it controls 2 life. The comparison, they're both kind of strong commanders in their own right. One utilizes auras to control and forcibly aim the creatures at your opponents, and then gives you card draw value off the back of it, which is incredibly strong, especially if you have multiple creatures which are goaded. The second creates its own aura token and heavily incentivizes your opponents to battle with each other for the buff creature, otherwise they get burnt for 2 life, which over time can be quite costly as more contracts get scattered onto creatures, playing very much more of a political angle. For the specific deck tech, we're going to focus on Killian the Decisive Mentor because it works better as the face commander, and Scriv's ability kind of buffs Killian, and that card value engine and draw is quite powerful.
So let's unpack Silverquills Influence and see what we get. Silvery Barbs, what it says on the side of the box. For those who don't know, Silverquill is essentially Orzhov, but with Strixhaven they kind of used it as one of the schools. But in the box, as always, you get this little information leaflet with a poster on it, and you've got Killian the Decisive Mentor, which is one of the it's the head commander, and then Scriv the Obligator, which is the backup commander. The deck itself, and then a, once again, paper little box. And then some punchable tokens. Let's dive into the deck. So, lead commander of this deck is Killian Decisive Mentor, pretty strong commander. And then the other one is Scriv the Obligator, kicking us off. So you get your standard little info card. We will kind of zoom through the tokens, and then starting at the top. In Jangajo Dynastorium, and has it's a prepared card, so one of the new prepared mechanic cards, so it has replenish as the secondary spell on this card. And then Forum Filibuster, Herald of Amenity, Changing Loyalty, Coherent Impetus, Intermediate Choreograph, Defacing Dusk Mage, Eclipse Stepped, and these were some of the new lands. So this is a land enters tapped unless you control 2 or more basics, so it's a pretty good little land. Turbulent Maw, again these are these turbulent lands. So if you have the lands enter tapped unless you control 8 or more lands, your opponent's control 8 or more lands. So really good in a commander game, especially if you're the last player. Turn order can kind of matter with this card. It means you can get an untapped land pretty much straight away. Umbral Expanse, Fable Passage, Eldrazi Conscription, Ajani's Chosen, Angelic Destiny, Archon of Sun's Grace, Armored Sky Hunter, Combat Calligrapher, Edelion of Countless Battles, Firemane Commander, Gift of Immortality, Core Spirit Dancer, Land Tax. Oh, I forgot there's a land tax in this. It's actually pretty good. So this is quite an expensive card, so they've decided to put it in the pre-con, which is really good and give you some good value. All the prices will be on the screen as always. So Mangara the Diplomat, Neil's Disciplined Enforcer. This is from the original pre-con as well. Pearl Ear Imperial Advisor, Promise of Loyalty, Redemption Arc, Shielded by Faith, Songbird's Blessing, Saram Senior Edificer, Starfield Mystic, Winds of Wrath, Doomwake Giant, Ghoulish Impetus, Keen Duelist. Once again, this has come out of the first wave of Strixhaven. Anguish and Making, Brina the Demigod. Oh, you get this was the commander of the previous time they went to Strixhaven. I have one of the deck 32 decks that I've built is around this. Ariat of the Charmed Apple, Inkshield, it's a very good card. Shadrick Silverquill, the Elder Dragon, that's a very good card as well. Tomiki, Wielder of Law, Vanquishing Verse, Caves of Kalios, Desolate Mire, Exotic Orchard, Fetid Heath, Isolated Chapel, Shine, Shadow Snarl, Temple of Silence, War Room, Flickering Ward, Fallen Ideal, Screams from Within, Arcane Signet, Sol Ring, Man Tower, Forum of Amenity. So these are the cards out of the main set now. Terramorphic Expanse, Chains of Custody, Darksteel Mutation, Ghostly Prison, Martial Impetus, Rafine's Guidance, Sage's Reverie, Secret Rendezvous, Sentinel Eyes, Shattered by Ghosts, Spirit Mantle, Transcendent Envoy, Animate Dead. This is a very good Reanimator card. Hateful Idleon, Parasitic Impetus, Fracture, Killian Ink Duelist, Belloir Stone, Talisman of Hierarchy, Arcane Lighthouse, Bajuka Bog, Path of Ancestry, Silverquill Campus, Study Hall, Sunlit Marsh, and then 8 plains, 8 swamps. That's the deck, so the yield will be on the screen, see how much value we've got from this. Moving on to the next section, let's learn how to pilot the deck.
Right, looking at the game plan and how to play the deck. So let's start off as always with the Mulligan guide. So this is the ideal starting hand that you want to kind of keep. So you want to have 2 to 3 lands, ideally having 1 of each of your colours. You want a cheap draw or cost reducer. So Saram Senior Edificer and Killian Ink Duelist are great examples. And then you want to at least have 1 early aura or ramp rock like a Sol Ring or an Arcane Signet. Things to avoid: having a hand of expensive finishers, so like Eldrazi Conscription, Ariat of the Charmed Apple with no kind of support, or kind of flooding yourself out with all lands or pure interaction with no engine. Let's learn how to pilot the deck. So we'll look at the early game, the mid game, and what your ultimate win con is. Turns 1 and 2 in the early game, you want to focus on having a card draw engine like Saram Senior Artificer, Core Spirit Dancer, and a cost reducer like Starfield Mystic, Transcendent Envoy, or Killian Ink Duelist. So every subsequent aura draws you a card and reduces the cost by 1 or 2. You want to then deploy on curve into Killian the Decisive Mentor on around turn 3 and 4, and then flood the board with as many auras as you can. So cast your impetus auras like conceived impetus, ghoulish impetus, so on and so forth, and removal auras like Darksteel Mutation, Chains of Custody, and Shielded by the Ghost. This will then goad opponent's creatures, neutralizing the threats to you specifically, and then trigger Killian's and draw cards off the back of the attacks. This will set you up to the later game, so between turns 5 to 9, token and constellation snowball. You want to resolve abilities like Archon of the Sun's Grace, Ajani's Chosen, Doomwake Giant, and Former Filibuster. Each enchantment ETBs produces flyers, shrinks opponents' boards, so lock the politics, then close the game. So this is where you want to establish your pillar 4 with Ghostly Prisons, your Neil's Discipline Enforcer, or your Ariat of the Charmed Apple. So opponents can't attack you. You want to then kind of deploy your finishers with your enchantment beaters using Eldrazi Conscription and Angelic Destiny to buff up your creatures, making them big hitters to end the game. And then it's always good to have in your back pocket your Winds of Wrath and utilize it if required just to clear a path for your enchanted creatures. That's a brief overview of how to pilot the deck. As always, let's look at some upgrades. So the upgrades that we're going to add, as always, we're going to add 5 cards, make 5 cuts, or for less than £50. First addition that we're going to add to the deck is Sagara's Aid. This lets every aura resolve at instant speed, which combined with Killian gives you a load of combat tricks. So if you want to be waiting for your opponents to deploy their turns, you can deploy an enchantment aura attached to one of your creatures to buff your creature, attached to one of your opponent's creatures to tap and goad it, making it safer to stack them and a much better way to deploy them than having to do them on your turn. This is probably the most expensive card on the list at like £12.39. The second card that I'm adding is Swords to Plowshares, which is basically a staple for any white cost interaction spell, which the deck severely needs. It doesn't have any instant speed removal, and Swords is a great addition. You can pick this up for about £1.75. The next card is Fear of Safety. This is a scalable pillar for. It's a little bit on the expensive side, but based on the volume of enchantments you control, it makes it incredibly difficult for your opponents to attack you, leaving them no choice but to swing at each other, which kind of helps bolster that whole pillar 4 and political angle that you're aiming for. You can pick this card up for about £4.86. The next card is Open the Vaults. So this is a mass enchantment recursion. So in case you get board wipe, because the biggest vulnerability actually to this deck is board wipes, because when you lose your creatures, you lose your enchantments. So what this does is it allows you to bring all of your enchantments back onto the battlefield, and it'll help you trigger multiple goad triggers from off Killian. This is a relatively cheap card, so you can pick it up for 44 pence. And then the last one is Erode. So this is another premium white cost interaction spell. It's actually come out of the Secrets of Strixhaven set. It lets you destroy target creature or planeswalker, and then they can go and find themselves a planes. It's similar to Path to Exile, but dearer version. This one comes in at £6.25, which brings our total upgrades to £25.69, which if you wanted to kind of then push this deck up to a bracket 3, you can then look at adding some of those game changers like a Teferi's Protection, Esper Sentinel, Smothering Tide, those kind of things, just to kind of push it up the bracket. As always, you add 5 cards, we have to remove 5 cards. The 5 cards that we're cut in, the first one is Atomic Wielder of Law. This card does not fit in the deck at all. First of all, the first line of text is it has affinity for planeswalkers. This is the only planeswalker in the deck, which makes it a little bit pointless. And the second ability kind of will rarely get triggered, because the whole purpose behind it is that you want to get attacked. But the way that you're setting up your game is you want to goad your opponent's creatures to attack each other, which means you'll never be receiving the benefit of this card. The second card removing is Keen Duelist. This is an off-theme card which doesn't really advance the aura goad playstyle and can be punishing because it's a coin flip card advantage. So you and a target opponent both flip the top card of your library, and then you each take damage for the cards that you flip. You're actually just providing free damage onto yourself and then giving card advantage to your opponent, which is unnecessary. The next card is Intermediate Choreography. This is an interesting class, but it's a very slow card, which doesn't really benefit the game plan until you kind of hit that 3rd level. And by that point, you've already sunk 7 mana into getting it to that 3rd level, that it doesn't really cost effective to do so. Yes, the first level kind of creates you a 2/1 flyer, Inkling token, which can be useful if you need a chunk blocker, for example. The second level will rarely be triggered, as there is no ways in the deck to forcibly lose life apart from your opponent attacking you, which is counterintuitive to what you want to do. And if you've got Pillar 4 built in, then you're kind of blocking that. The most useful part of this class is that third ability, which you're spending a lot to get. The next card that we are removing is Secret Rendezvous. This is just straight up a bad draw spell. I can understand it from a political point of view because it allows you to draw 3 cards. You can make deals and arrangements with your opponents, but there are better draw engines in the deck which you much rather pull than this card. The last one that we are removing is Fireman Cammander. This is another political draw spell which will benefit your opponents more than you, especially if the creature's already goaded. The way that this works, your opponent gets a draw when they attack with a goaded attack on your opponents. You're actually giving them the benefit, so you're forcibly making them attack. It doesn't make any sense. These are the upgrades. Now let's look at the deck specs. Right, let's kick off, as we always do, with the average CMC and give a deeper dive into the mana costs in the deck. So the average CMC for the deck is 2.97. This means there is a higher probability of having an early game play. What's contributing to this low CMC is the fact that there is only one card in the deck which is higher than 5, which will be Eldrazi's Conscription. The deck is heavily weighted in that 3 CMC slot, which is good for the early game plays and gives the capability to deploy multiple cards in a single turn, which will help kind of allow you to play multiple enchantments and then trigger your commander multiple times. The difficulty you'll have here is we've overloaded that 3 CMC slots. So there's 21 cards in that slot. That means there's a lot of competition with your commander. So if you are on curve, you have a lot of choice to deploy. You need to make the right decision if deploying your commander is the right thing to do, or holding it and waiting until the later turns to then deploy your commander and an aura at the same time. The secondary downside to having such a low curve is that you don't really have many larger CMC cards, so you don't really have many endgame finishers, and you might struggle to close out the game because you don't really have any powerhouse cards. The next section, which is combos and brackets. So there are no combos in the deck, and it firmly fits into that bracket to say well-built and synergized deck like you would get from any average precon. It's focused, even though every card isn't the highest powered choice. So there are no game changers, no mass land and arm, no extra turns, no 2-card infinite combos, and then no tutors. The value that you get from this deck. This deck is a value powerhouse. So we purchased this for £47. You are getting plus 52.8% value from the original purchase price of this deck, which is absolutely phenomenal. In terms of how that's kind of broken down, of the new cards, which there are 13, you're getting £15.21, with your highest are the Turbulent Maw, which is one of the new lands, which is £5.13, Eclipse Step, which is £2.47, and Django Distorian, which is one of the new prepared cards at £2.26, and Changing Loyalty at $1.59. Where you're really getting the value is through the reprints. So there are 71 reprints in the deck, earn a total of $54.91 in terms of reprint value, with the most expensive card being that Land Tax, which is desperately needed a reprint, but it's now coming in at £9.21, so that's a really fantastic card to get in this deck. The other notable mentions are Animate Dead at £5.13, Ink Shield £4.31, Ghostly Prison at £3.40, War Room at £2.35, Sol Ring £2.05, Anguish Unmaking £1.67, Sheltered by Ghosts £1.44, Arcane Lighthouse at £1.33, Paducah Bog at £1.31, and then Fabled Passage at £1.07. From all the basic lands, you're getting about £1.70. For those who picked up this deck when it was launched, it's actually been a very good value. To try and repurchase this deck now, you're finding it for about £70 odd, which means if you pick it up today, you're actually only getting 80% of the value. So for those who picked it up on launch, well done. This is one of the decks that actually is worth picking up because there is a lot of value built into it. Well, let's look at the card distribution of the deck. So baseline numbers in terms of card types you're breaking down to. You're getting about 26 creatures, 4 artifacts, 26 enchantments, which makes sense for an enchantment heavy deck, 4 instants, 3 sorceries, and 37 lands. Now, if we look at our deck template and what you kind of expect, so you want Commander because it's a Soul Commander led deck. You want 30 30 to 33 cards as part of your deck plan. This deck only has 24 cards as a part of its overall deck plan. Yes, your commander kind of includes into this, so 25 say. Interaction pieces, you want 10 to 12. The deck currently only has 5. Mass disruption, 3 to 4. The deck comes with 6, so you're indexing above on that. Card advantage, you want between 10 to 12 pieces. The deck kind of over indexes on this, so you've got 17, not including your commander because that's a card engine in itself, so 18 pieces of card advantage. So these are primarily draw engines. RAM, you want 10 to 12 pieces, you've only got 8. Lands, you want between 36 to 38, you're getting 37, which isn't bad. You probably want to look to redistribute some of that card advantage into your ramp and interaction to make sure that you can kind of deal with any threats and make sure that you are ramping on curve to get your creatures and spells out. Mana distribution. So I've done something slightly different here. I've taken a look at how much mana is being produced by the deck and then how much everything costs. So if you're indexing into more pips than the other. Start with the production. In terms of white mana, you're producing 43% and 45% is producing black, and then the 12% is colorless. Where this kind of needs a deeper focus and you want to kind of potentially look at moving those production levels, 70% of the deck is white mana. You actually need more white pips in the deck than you do black. You might want to consider indexing heavier into white mana, so maybe adjust some of the basic lands, put more plains in the deck than swamps as an example, or look at, if you are going to adjust the mana base, look at more white land options. And finally, just to round up the specs, let's take a look at the Chrissy score. So as always, we're going to start with the consistency of the deck. So the consistency scores 4.25. This is because the tutors in the deck are a tad thin, relying on attack-based tutoring like Armoured Skyhunter and Songbirds. Blessing, while land tax's rate, it's very conditional and can be a challenge depending on where you are in the turn order. So if you are first, actually land tax doesn't help you. The draw engines built into the deck are respectable, with about 6 different engines built into the deck, and the primary ones being on the commander, making it repeatable throughout the game. Key weaknesses for this category is due to the lack of premium and repeatable tutors. You will find hands still miss key payoffs, and by continually drawing for answers, hoping to find one. Resilience, it scores a 3 out of 10. The deck has a real combat and value threat base with token makers, a Voltron Aura style, goad engines, and light recursion. Enough for a modest non-combo resilience, but it has no board level protection spells. The majority of the non-land cards are enchantments, so there is a risk that you'll actually pull more enchantments than you will interaction or creatures. A single resolved enchantment or creature board wide kind of sets you back quite a lot and makes the strategy structurally vulnerable and hard to recover. From an interaction point of view, it scores 4.75 out of 10. The deck has a solid permanent based disruption with goad and the 7 pieces of goad, but almost no stack presence, so no counter spells, no free interaction, and 0 turn protection effects. There are 6 instant speed interaction spells and a couple of flash auras, so timing is going to be key when using them. In terms of speed, it scores a 4 out of 10. So when goldfish in the deck, you typically are looking at a turn 8 or 9 for the deck to kind of fully come online. So your sequencing kind of looks like turn 1 and 2 you play your land, your mana rocks or cheap draw engine. Turn 3 to 4 you deploy your commander. Turns 5 to 7 you want to establish tokens and pillow fort effects, and then at turns 8 and 9 you want to begin to goad and drain the table with opponents attacking each other. There are no infinite lines or explosive cards to help compress that kind of clock. From a yield point of view, this is where this deck absolutely shines and kind of recovers the majority of your score. So you're getting a plus £24.82 yield on this deck, which is absolutely fantastic. There are some absolute gems of cards in this deck, which I would kind of recommend you kind of picking up, even if it isn't just to play this precon. You can pick up this deck and bolster a bunch of your other commander deck, which brings the final Chrissy score to 28.82, which is a very good score. Right, let's take a look at the ranking. As you would have guessed it, this scores the top of the 2026 Precon Commander Deck ranking, giving us a total score of 28.82, which blows the next Commander Deck out the water, which was Dance of the Elements, which scored in around 17 points. This is a very much a value powerhouse deck and would recommend picking up.
Right, that's a wrap for this DeckTech episode. Silverquills Influence is a political machine, all about building that pillar fort style engine. You get some ridiculous value. I'm not going to kind of build this as my main political Orzhov Silverquill Commander deck because I've got the previous one from the last time we visited Strixhaven, but there are many cards in this deck which I have taken out to upgrade that, so it kind of has increased my deck 32 progress. So I've added a couple of percentage to that and jumped us up from like 39 where we started to about 42, which is a great improvement. Thank you for sticking with me. As always, if you want to keep supporting Pod Games and the channel, 2 ways to do it. One is jump down in the description and check out our marketplaces. A bunch of these cards will be listed across our marketplaces, the ones that aren't going in the deck 32 cards. The second way to support Pod Games is please engage with the YouTube algorithm, like, comment, subscribe. Let us know if there's anything that you liked about this. Drop a comment down below. There's more Secrets of Strixhaven to come, so I'll see you in the next one. Bye.